Hello and welcome to SAR Histories, where on the channel today we shall be visiting one of England's oldest and most romantic houses, Haddon Hall. Questions remain as to the early history of Haddon Hall, as the nearby villages of Over Haddon and Never Haddon are mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086, but there is no record of the hall at Haddon. The first mention of a house and chapel, which was probably built around 1150, occurs in the settlement of 1180, whereby it became property of Avice, daughter of William Avenel II, where it remained in the Vernon family until 1567, when it passed into the Manners family, where it remains to this day. Haddon Hall was built from Derbyshire limestone and originally followed a plan of a Norman fort, but over the passing centuries the hall would be extended upon, slowly becoming the house that we can see today. The earliest recorded royal visitor to Haddon was Prince Arthur, the elder brother of Henry VIII. Arthur stayed for some time in 1501 as the guest of Sir Henry Vernon. In 1872, Prince Edward and Princess Alexandria took a medieval dish-themed lunch inside the Great Hall. The Banqueting Hall would have been a communal living space when it was built in the 14th century. By the 15th century, however, the family would have been dining in the Great Chamber and spending time for leisure in the parlour. The Great Hall became a room in which to hold social events, and its name changed to the Banqueting Hall. The parlour is a typical Tudor room which served as private quarters for the family. The room was completed in 1545 by George Vernon. In the window recess are carved figures in the oak panelling, thought to be Henry VII and his wife Elizabeth of York. The plastered ceiling was installed by Sir Henry Vernon in the early 1500s. It is decorated with painted Tudor roses and Talbot dogs in recognition of his wife Anne. There is also boar's heads of the Vernon family. The long gallery was begun by George Vernon and would have been used as an indoor promenade. It was from here, as legend has it, that George's daughter Dorothy eloped to marry John Manners. It is thanks to them that we see the room as it is today. The gallery's position on the upper floor offers fine views of the garden and countryside. If you look closely at the diamond-shaped panes, you'll notice that they are set at different angles. This is to both make the panes visibly attractive and maximise the daylight. The furniture in the long gallery is representative of several periods. The oak dowry chest is from the 15th century and was originally kept in the chapel and used to store the title deeds of the estate. It now stands at the far end of the gallery. It was this room which was used in the film Elizabeth, which starred Cate Blanchett. The state bedroom was redecorated by John Manners and his wife Dorothy in the late 16th century. Hung on the walls are fine tapestries which date from the mid-16th century. Where there was once a bed, now stands a snooker table, as the bed was removed to Belvoir Castle, where it is kept in the picture gallery. The Great Chamber was re-roofed and given its present form about 1500 by Sir Henry Vernon. Traces of gold and green paint are still visible on parts of the 17th century oak panelling, indicating that it was once lavishly decorated. 17th century tapestries of Flemish or French style hang from the walls. The Earl's apartment was originally a bedroom from 1641 until the family moved to Belvoir Castle in 1703. The room retains its original roof, which may have once been covered in plaster. Above the fireplace are signatures in the plaster of visiting members of the royal family: King George V in 1933 and Prince Charles and Princess Anne in 1979. The kitchen at Haddon Hall is one of the finest surviving examples of a Tudor kitchen. In its heyday, this would have been a busy, noisy place. Built in the 14th century, the kitchen would have stood apart from the other buildings to minimise the risk of the fire spreading to the main house. The passageway linking the hall and kitchen is thus a much later addition. The kitchen is absolutely fascinating, and if you look carefully, you can see evidence of wear on the surfaces, caused by many years of food preparation. The original milk larder now houses a fine collection of dole cupboards. These were left outside for passing traders and estate workers and filled with leftovers from the kitchen. It is from these cupboards that the modern phrase "on the dole" stems from. The butchery was a place where food would be preserved by drying, salting and pickling. The salting trough is from the 15th century and is formed from a single, hollowed out oak trunk. The oak block in the centre is the same age as the trough and was used for jointing meat or catching drips from the hanging meat. Above them is a 17th century hanging rack where carcasses would have been hooked over the bar while they were gutted. King John's Wall was built in the late 12th century. Originally, the wall encircled the chapel and a number of timber buildings. Over the years, the wall was incorporated into the hall as it was extended. This section you see today is all that remains visible. The tapestries on display at the hall are all that remain of a much larger collection, the rest being destroyed by a fire in 1925. About 60 pieces were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The most important tapestries are those depicting the five senses, which may have once belonged to Charles I. The museum houses a collection of small, everyday objects that were once lost or thrown away. It is captivating to think of the people who once owned these objects, especially the child's shoe. Other objects on display here are a plaster reredos showing the Last Supper, which dates from the 15th century, firearms which belong to Lord Robert Manners, and a shilling coin from the reign of Edward VI. These unique objects were discovered in the early 20th century when Haddon Hall was undergoing restoration. Fortunately for us, the 9th Duke of Rutland recognised the importance of the finds and established the museum in which to display them. The garden was laid out by John Manners and his wife Dorothy. Not much is known about its early planting, though it is likely that it was in the Elizabethan style. Walking the garden path offers a splendid view of the countryside and of Haddon Hall itself. Though the garden is not the most impressive, it has a charm which puts you at ease and fills you with a fondness for Haddon. In all, I enjoyed my time at Haddon Hall and would certainly recommend it. For me, it was like being inside a time capsule, and each room took you to a different period of history. During my visit, a few rooms were closed, like the chapel, which I would very much like to see. The guides that gave the free tours were a little rusty and didn't seem to know which rooms were open and closed, but hopefully soon this will smooth out as they give more and more tours. As great as the house is, I feel that it is a little overpriced for the experience I got. At £22 per adult, tickets can get pretty hefty if going in a group, though children are free. There is good car parking across the road, but this is an extra £3.50. For me, this should be free, as I feel tickets are expensive enough. It is great that Lord Edward Manners shares the history of Haddon Hall with us all, and I thank him and the staff for their hospitality. If you have enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, and I will see you again soon here on SAR Histories. Until then, goodbye.